Who will the Falcons take in round one of the 2020 NFL Draft? Not sure, but I'm sure it's going to be a doozy.
You are Locked On Falcons, your daily Atlanta Falcons podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Welcome back, everyone, to another illustrious episode of the Locked On Falcons podcast, your daily Atlanta Falcons podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. And today's episode is brought to you by LinkedIn Jobs, going to help you find a qualified candidates you want to talk to faster. Post your job for free at linkedin.com/LockedOnNFL. Terms and conditions apply. So if you don't know me, I'm your humble host, Aaron Freeman, a.k.a. Mr. Drew, a.k.a. the Jolly Green Giant, a.k.a. Mr. a.k.a. And I've been covering the Atlanta Falcons for a very long time, almost 2 decades, formerly at falcfans.com, RIP, still going strong on this illustrious podcast. And I thank each and every one of you that go strong with me as everydayers. That means you make this podcast your first listen each and every day. And all you got to do to become an everydayer, subscribe or follow for free on YouTube or wherever you listen to podcasts. So today we are going to project round one. We'll talk about the Falcons potentially trading up or down the board. Terry Fontenot changing the narrative about his tenure in Atlanta. But since we're a little shy of 30 minutes from the start of the NFL draft, we all are invested in who the Atlanta Falcons are going to take in round one. And as I said at the top, I don't quite know, but I'm going to do my best to make an educated guess. So I think it's going to be one of 6 edge rushers. And I'm going to stack them in the order that I think the Falcons will take them and prefer. And then I'll give you my thoughts on how I would personally stack them. But I feel reasonably confident, very optimistic that we'll finally get that defensive player in round one tonight, roughly, a little more than 2 hours from now as I sit here talking to you guys. But I think it's going to be one of these 6 edges. Jalon Walker of Georgia. I feel like if he's on the board, that will be the Falcons pick. That's number 1 in the Falcons preferred way. Number 2, I feel like, is Mike Green out of Marshall. Number 3, James Pearce Jr. out of Tennessee, right? There's been so much buzz as of late about Pearce being possibly the pick, sort of the dark horse candidate. Number 4, Mykel Williams, Jalon Walker's teammate out of Georgia. Number 5, Donovan Ezeraku out of Boston College. And number 6 being Shamar Stewart out of Texas A&M. Now, if I'm stacking them just based off of how I think about these prospects, I would have Mike Green at the top. I wasn't there in January during Senior Bowl week, but I'm there now. I feel like Mike Green is the best bet from an on-field standpoint to be the most impactful pass rusher from this year's draft, followed by, probably a surprise to many of you, Shamar Stewart. I feel like Stewart, he gets talked about as this very unproductive, high upside player, but I think he has a high floor because of the power element to his game that I feel like I know that translates at the next level, and I feel better about that ability to translate to a productive NFL player, whether that's going to be an impact, high-level pass rusher, we'll see, but a productive NFL player better than anybody else. My third guy is Donovan Ezeraku. I feel better about Ezeraku than these next group of guys. I just, I don't know if Ezeraku has the high upside to be a dominant pass rusher, but similar to Shamar Stewart, he has skills that I think will translate to the next level, and I think that will make him into a safer player. These last 3 guys in Mykel Williams, who I would have 4th, James Pearce Jr., who I have 5th, and Jalon Walker, who I have a 6th. I feel like these guys are boom-bust guys. I honestly feel like that. They could be very good in the NFL, but I think a lot of it is going to depend on the right situation that they go to, and right now, I don't feel great about the situation that they'd be going to here in Atlanta. Maybe in other places, I would feel very differently about their potential. But here in Atlanta, I feel like these guys are the boom-bust guys. And I know that's controversial, but that's how I sort of feel about it. And when we talk about Green and Pearce, right, they've been the guys that over the last 72-ish hours have been getting the majority of the buzz for the Falcons. Various NFL insiders like Diana Rossini of The Athletic, Albert Breer of Sports Illustrated. We talked earlier this week about Jonathan Jones of CBS Sports, who had the Falcons taking James Pearce at that 15th overall pick. They've been mentioning Green, Pearce as the options. I saw that in the ESPN's final mock as a potential option. I think Pearce was mentioned and Green was mentioned. Green was the pick, I think, by Field Yates, and Pearce was mentioned, right? And it feels like between these two guys, when you look at various insiders, if the Falcons don't take one of those two guys at 15, which again, a lot of people are predicting to be the case, one or both of these guys could potentially fall out of round one, right? Whoever the Falcons pass on could fall out, right? And it does seem like Mike Green in particular, his stock may be falling a little bit more when we talk about him, right? Daniel Jeremiah did not have either Mike Green or James Pearce Jr. in his final round one mock. Dane Brugler of The Athletic had Green going 32. He did not have Pearce in his round one mock. Jones had Pearce at 15, but he did not have Green in his round one mock. Albert Breer on his, Sports Illustrated on his most recent intel article for the draft Thursday morning said that Mike Green is off several teams' boards. And it goes back to a conversation we had back after the combine when it became revealed public on, the quote unquote off-field issues that Mike Green had, which was 2 sexual assault allegations, one in high school, one in his after his freshman year at the University of Virginia, that led to his transfer to Marshall. And I said at that time, I do not believe because of this, Mike Green will be on the Falcons board. I've come around to believing that is not necessarily the case, given all the recent buzz over the last 6 or so weeks. However, it is still a possibility that the Falcons will pass on Mike Green for those reasons, that they do not want, whether it's fair or foul in your eyes, to present their player as the top prospect in their draft class, the face of their draft, as a guy that has this sort of thing in his background. So I say that as something going back to what we talked about a couple of years ago with Jalen Carter, where I can understand why there's going to be a lot of people that are going to disagree with it, just like people disagree with the decision to pass on Jalen Carter 2 years ago, and still think that was a major mistake that the Falcons made. But I will continue to stress that I understand why the Falcons will do it, whether I agree with it or not. It is certainly something. And if they do wind up passing on Mike Green, then I'm going to 100% take credit for it as the Falcons prophet. What we insiders do, these quote unquote insiders, they just throw a lot of stuff at the wall, and then whatever sticks, you claim, I called that months ago, right? And then you just ignore all the other stuff that's going on. So, we'll focus on my original prediction with Mike Green. That's when, not the most recent prediction with Mike Green. And if he is the pick, then we'll focus on the most recent prediction with Mike Green, not the original prediction. That's how that works, guys. That's the secret to being an insider. Just throw a whole bunch of stuff at the wall and see what sticks. But, it's interesting when we talk about Jalon Walker. Daniel Jeremiah in his final mock had Jalon Walker falling to 15, and we talked about that earlier this week, that if Jalon Walker doesn't go 8 to Carolina, the second most popular destination for him has been 15 to the Atlanta Falcons. Daniel Jeremiah's final mock draft reflected that. Mel Kiper, in his most recent intel article on top of Field Yates's mock draft, said that Kenneth Grant, the Michigan D tackle, is also in play for the Falcons at this range. So we'll see what the Falcons wind up doing. I think anything and everything is still on the table for the Atlanta Falcons. I feel optimistic, not confident. You never be confident with the Falcons doing a certain thing. When you expect them to zig, they will zag. But I'm optimistic that will not be the case this year, and they will take an edge rusher. I think, it's most likely to be Mike Green, but it could be James Pearce. It could be Jalon Walker if he falls. It could be any one of these 6 guys. But it's just really going to depend on the first 14 picks and who's going to be available, who's off the board, who's not, all that stuff. And, we'll talk later about this, but there's potential of an offensive line run early in this draft, and that may, bump some of these edges down. And there'll be more of those guys available when the Falcons are on the clock at 15 than maybe people originally thought, as well as the depth of this edge class being as strong as it is, maybe hurting some of these guys at the top, where teams are going, yeah, we can wait and get similar guys later in the draft. So we will see on that front. I think trades are also on the table for the Falcons, whether they stick at 15 or not. They can move up, they can move down. Again, I think moving down is more likely, but we'll talk more about that as we continue today's episode. But I think a big thing at stake is, the narrative surrounding Terry Fontenot. He has a chance to change the narrative about him and his tenure in Atlanta tonight, potentially involving a trade back. And we'll get into all of that as we continue today's Locked On Falcons. So this time of year, we get extra conscious about our finances, and we often look at our bank accounts and wonder, where did that money go? And probably a week ago, you're like, that money went to the IRS. But other times during the year, you're probably wondering, and it can go to dining out and online shopping, entertainment. It's easy to lose track your finances. And that's where Monarch Money comes in, your personal CFO, giving you full visibility and control over your finances. Monarch Money isn't just a budgeting app, it's a complete financial command center, and you can track all your accounts, investments, and spending all in one place, so you can stop managing your money and start building your wealth. Take control of your finances with Monarch Money by using code LOCKEDONNFL at monarchmoney.com, and you'll get 50% off your first year. That's monarchmoney.com, code LOCKEDONNFL for half off your first year. And there's nothing like the energy of a live game, whether it's an NBA playoff game or a last-minute MLB showdown. And, it's hard to find great seats. Well, it used to be until Game Time showed up, right? Whether you're looking for sports, comedy, music, theater tickets, whatever event is near you, Game Time is making it easier to get those tickets, even last minute one. You sit there on a beautiful sunny afternoon and you say, hey, it'll be a great day to head on down to Truist Park, grab myself a dog and a beer, no sweat. That's the spontaneity that Game Time gives you, because prices actually drop on the app just as the event gets closer, and with their all-in pricing as well on the app. You see the total cost up front, so no surprise fees at checkout. And of course, we love the panoramic seat view. So take the guesswork out of buying tickets with Game Time by downloading the Game Time app, create an account, and use code LOCKEDONNFL, and you'll get $20 off your first purchase. Terms apply. Again, that's LOCKEDONNFL for $20 off. Download Game Time today. Last minute tickets, lowest price guaranteed. So before we get into the Falcons trade back options and changing the narrative, I do want to let you guys know of the programming that we're planning on doing tonight on night one of the draft. We will be hopefully going live at the end of round one, somewhere around midnight Eastern time, shortly after midnight, to give you the recap of all the things that happened in round one, including reacting to the Falcons pick. That will be your full 30-minute, Locked On Falcons podcast. But probably between then, you'll get other things, at least on the YouTube side of things, and Locked On Falcons, as well as your audio feed, as well as Locked On Sports Atlanta. That's probably going to be where you get the most immediate full reaction of the show with myself and Jarvis Davis on whoever the Falcons take. So keep that in mind on YouTube. Again, subscribe to Locked On Sports Atlanta on YouTube or wherever you get your podcasts, and you'll get all the great content coming your way, this whole weekend. So continue to make all these Locked On Atlanta shows your first, second, third, fourth, fifth listens all weekend long. So we're talking about Terry Fontenot changing the narrative. And I talked about this a little bit on Locked On Sports Atlanta with the Atlanta football party that we recorded Thursday morning with Jarvis Davis, myself, Tanisha Batiste, and Maria Martin, who's in Green Bay to cover the Falcons pick for 11 Alive News. And we talked about how, the perception, all three of us, myself, Jarvis, and Maria, all kind of said the perception of Terry Fontenot's draft record has been pretty mid, pretty meh, pretty okay, average, fine, nothing to get excited about. And he has an opportunity to change the narrative tonight, because when we talk about the trade back options, because of the potential that guys like James Pearce and Mike Green, because of character red flags, if you want to call it that, may not be high on the board, the Falcons can come away potentially in getting one of those guys, moving back and still being able to move back a number of spots and get one of those guys, because those guys may not be coveted by NFL teams. And in addition to getting an impact edge rusher in round one, they also can add some more trade assets that they so desperately need in order to improve this roster. And that can be the conversation as we get to the end of the night when we're doing our full recap on Locked On Sports Atlanta or Locked On Falcons, talking about how Terry potentially could change the narrative and how this round one, he sort of won round one, manipulated the board, sort of seemed to be in control and all that stuff. And so we may not be saying, hey, this is a mid sort of general manager. This is an okay, fine, underwhelming, meh, all those words type of general manager by the end of the night. And I know, it's a pick your flavor when it comes to the edge rushers. I know Falcon fans that love Mike Green. I know Falcon fans that don't like Mike Green. I know Falcon fans that are all in on Izaraku or all in on Jalon Walker or Shamar Stewart or completely off the board on those guys and Mykel Williams. It's all of the above, right? It's a pick your flavor. But it does seem like the general consensus, at least the majority of Falcon fans I've talked to, seem like Mike Green is that guy for them. That if winning the poll, it does seem like Mike Green would get the majority of the votes as this fan base's preferred edge rusher, but we will see on that front. So that's why I use Mike Green as a potential trade back option, because I think that would probably garner more praise of Terry Fontenot than if he would to trade back and take Shamar Stewart, or trade back and get Donovan Ezeraku or something like that. So we will see if the Falcons can move back in this draft. Obviously, they have every reason to want to move back, get more picks, because this team is not one player away. We talked about that as well on the Atlanta Football Party. It's why I tend to be dismissive of the idea of trading up. The Falcons aren't one player away. And as exciting as it would be if the Falcons traded up for Abdul Carter, for me, my perception is like they would get a great pass rusher, but they would probably still wind up continuing to be a mediocre team, because this team is not one great pass rusher away from being good. It's one great pass rusher and like 5 other players away from being good, if you ask me. So if they do trade up, it's a possibility. You never put anything past the Atlanta Falcons. They will get weird in some way. It will make for great buzz, but I don't know if it's going to be the sort of winning move that a lot of people think. But we'll see on that front. So when it comes to trading back, which I think is a lot more plausible, I think the player we're going to keep our eye on is Shedeur Sanders. The expectation from lots of folks is that he's going to slide in this draft, and he'll be on the board when the Falcons pick at 15 and does a team at the back end of round 1 or at the top of round 2 want to come up and get Shedeur. So that's a trade option. I don't think that's a likely trade option for the Falcons. I think what's more likely is a team wanting to move up for the offensive lineman, right? As I suggested earlier, it feels like there's going to be a run on offensive linemen early in this draft. I have 3 projected in my top 10. I've seen a lot of people projecting 3 in the top 7 in this draft. We'll see maybe more. I've seen Daniel Jeremiah and both Dane Brugler of The Athletic having Gray Zabel go in the top 13 in their mock drafts. Does that potentially, if we get 4 offensive linemen in the top 12, 13 picks, does that push up the 5th, 6th offensive lineman? Could that be Tyler Booker of Alabama, Josh Connolly Jr. of Oregon, and Josh Simmons of Ohio State? And does that make a team that's offensive line needy? And we're looking at you, the Houston Texans. Does that make them be a little bit more aggressive to come up? And does that help the Falcons potentially move back from 15 to 25 where Houston is picking? And I think the earlier trade that Houston did on Thursday afternoon, swapping late round picks with the Cleveland Browns, to me hints that Houston is looking to come up, right? Cleveland got a 5th round pick from Houston this year and a 5th round pick in 2027. Houston got 2 6 and a 7th from Cleveland this year. And to me, that suggests that Houston is securing late round picks because they're going to wind up trading their early round picks to go up and get that offensive lineman, right, at the top of the draft. They have a 1st, they have a 2nd, they have 2/3, no 4ths, now no 5ths, and now a bunch of 6s and 7s, right? And theoretically, you look at the various trade charts, the Texans could go from 25 to 15 with Atlanta by giving up that 2nd. And I think the Falcons would happily take that and see which one of these 6 edge rushers is still on the board. It's possible they could all be gone by that point, but depending on how it goes, if only 2 of those guys are gone by the time the Falcons are on the clock, I think it's more likely that we'll have at least one of those guys on the board when Houston is picking at pick 6. Could that be a Mike Green? Could that be a James Pearce Jr.? Could that be Donovan Ezeraku or Shamar Stewart? I think all of that is possibilities. Now, if there is an early run on offensive linemen, Houston may not wait till 15. They might want to get up earlier, right? And if they were to package their 1st and their 2nd and both 3rds, they could potentially get as high into the top 10, right, to 8 to get to Carolina. And so there's been a lot of speculation that there's going to be a lot of trades tonight. I've seen, people yesterday saying, oh, this is going to be a crazy draft, all tons of trades. In the last hour, I've seen some people kind of pull back on that a little bit. And again, we'll see how it all goes. Again, every year, the last 72 hours, everybody's speculating on all the big blockbuster trades. And then we get to draft night and no one makes trades. But we'll see if this year's draft is a little bit different just because you don't have as many blue chip prospects and maybe teams are aggressive trying to get those blue chip prospects at the top of the draft. So we'll see on that point. But I think when we're projecting the top 5 picks, right? It used to be 4 picks seemed to be locks at the top of the round. Now it seems like there's a 5th pick that the consensus agrees is going to go. And so that feels like pick 6 to the Las Vegas Raiders, 7 to the New York Jets, and 8 to the Carolina Panthers is kind of the pivot point in the draft, right? And that matters because, again, Jalon Walker, if he's the apple of your eye, again, he's not my preferred pass rusher in this draft class, but I know a lot of people feel very differently about that, and I will eagerly anticipate being able to change my mind by the time we get through Jalon Walker's film after the draft. So I'm not going to complain about Jalon Walker if he's the pick. I'm just going to express my misgivings about why I have concerns about it. But that being said, if that pivot point at 6, 7, 8 and Jalon Walker does start to slide, maybe he could slide all the way to 15. So we'll see on that front. But talking about those 4 or 5 picks that are locks, let's get into, how these picks go. Where does Shedeur Sanders go in tonight? That's going to be one of the big stories of the night. And let's give some bold predictions about how this first round goes with my quote unquote final mock draft of the night as we wrap up today's Locked On Falcons. So as a small business owner, your work doesn't end when the clock hits 5. Your business is always on your mind, which means it's time to hire. You need a partner that works just as hard as you do. That's where LinkedIn Jobs comes in. When you clock out, LinkedIn clocks in. LinkedIn makes it easy to post your job for free, share it with your network, and get qualified candidates all in one place. And when you post your job, LinkedIn has a new feature that can help you write job descriptions and then quickly get your job in front of the right people with deep candidate insights. And here's a pro tip: when you add the hashtag hiring frame to your profile picture, you'll double your reach to qualified candidates. No wonder 72% of small businesses say LinkedIn Jobs has helped me find high quality hires. Post your job for free at linkedin.com/LockedOnNFL. That's linkedin.com/LockedOnNFL to post your job for free. Terms and conditions apply. So I stayed up till 1 a.m. last night working on a mock draft, going through the first 2 rounds using the PFF mock draft simulator to sort of project, looking at all the various insider mocks, the rumors and all that stuff to give my best estimation of how I think round 1 will go. And so for those of you on the YouTube side of things, you get to see that. We're not going to read it off for you for all the audio listeners, but we'll rattle off the top 10, right, in this mock draft. Of course, I have Cam Ward, the quarterback out of Miami, going number 1 to Tennessee. Number 2, Travis Hunter, cornerback/wide receiver to Colorado, to the Cleveland Browns. Number 3, the Giants take Abdul Carter, the edge rusher from Penn State. Number 4, the Patriots take Will Campbell, the tackle/guard from LSU. Number 5, Ashton Jeanty to the Jacksonville Jaguars, the running back from Boise State. And so this feels like the consensus at this point in time, but things start to get a little interesting. Seems like Kelvin Banks, number 6 to the Las Vegas Raiders, is building buzz, the offensive tackle from Texas. Number 7, Armand Mimbu, Missouri offensive tackle, going to the New York Jets. I still have Jalon Walker going 8 overall to the Carolina Panthers, the edge linebacker out of Georgia. Number 9, now Mason Graham, who was previously projected to go 5 overall to the Jaguars, now falls to the New Orleans Saints, the Michigan D tackle. And then number 10, the Chicago Bears take a tight end, top 10 tight ends. We love those here on Locked On Falcons. They take Tyler Warren, the tight end out of Penn State, to the Chicago. So we will see what that does. I have a special guest popping in. Just decided to get in right under the wire, my friend. I'm just going through my top 10 draft and whatnot. So how are you doing, my friend?
I'm well, man. Just coming back from Wingstop. I got my order, hot sprinkle with lemon pepper, baby. Yeah, we're on our way back, man. So, yeah, I'm excited about this thing, man. I'm getting happy. I'm actually happy right now. Like I'm great. I'm great right now.
Okay, so the higher you go, the harder you fall, right? So Jarvis, as I was breaking it down earlier, I feel like they're going to take an edge rusher. I feel optimistic. I don't feel confident. I feel optimistic that they're going to take an edge rusher, right? Is that where is that why you feeling happy right now?
Yes, I feel like they're going to take an edge rusher, and I feel like it might be somebody that I might not necessarily be favorable of, but I feel like the edge rusher is going to be the pick. It's going to be the pick, and I think that they're going to do the right thing this year, man. I feel it in my gut. I feel like they have no choice. So, yeah, it's time. It's time.
Yeah, I was breaking that down as well. Like, I was stacking how I like these edge rushers, but they could take a guy that I'm not necessarily in love with, but I'll take it. At this point in time, you got to start somewhere. That's what we've been saying for the better part of 3 months, right?
Yeah, man. I mean, beggars can't be choosers, because here's the thing, man. There is some talent in this draft. There are a couple of guys that I'll be very comfortable with. I love, Donovan Zaraku. Mike Green would be my first choice at 15, but if by chance Terry Fontenot able to work some magic and get some extra picks and go down a few spots, as long as they do it before Tampa Bay, I feel like I can still get Donovan Zaraku, and pick up some extra picks. But I'm all about bringing guys in right now. If Mike Green is sitting there and that phone is ringing, man, I would end that call very quickly, and I'll turn my dog on paper and it'll have Mike G on on that card and walking up to the podium.
Yeah, I'm in the same boat. He's my preferred option of the potential options. We'll see. I was just breaking down my final mock draft, and I did have Donovan Ezeraka going 19 to the Tampa Bay Buccaneers, Mykel Williams 17 to Cincinnati, Mike Green 15 to Atlanta, Jalon Walker 8 to Carolina, and I have your boy Shamar Stewart going all the way to 32 to the Philadelphia Eagles. What do you think about that prediction?
I mean, that's spot on, especially that Shamar Stewart. I actually like that pick for the Eagles because based off of what we talked about, right? They already have a nucleus that if Shamar Stewart doesn't work out, ain't nobody gonna be complaining because they already have a Super Bowl and they have that man JC lining up in the middle. So that's the type of locker room that I feel Shamar Stewart would probably flourish in, because he won't have to be the guy. So yeah, I think I actually love that pick for the Eagles. I think that'll be a perfect landing spot for him.
Yeah, another bold prediction. I was breaking down my bold predictions. I have Shedeur Sanders falling all the way out of round 1. I got him going 33 to Cleveland. I think we're going to get my bold prediction is we'll get one quarterback. I think it's possible that we'll get 2 quarterbacks tonight, but I would bet more money on Jackson Dart being that second quarterback than Shedeur Sanders. I have Mason Graham going to the Saints. What are your thoughts on those bold predictions?
All this stuff is weird, right? Because we have coming into this particular season, the college football season, there was some conversation about Shedeur being the number 1 overall pick. Want to fall in love with Cam Ward. I get it. He's an exciting player to watch. He has a live arm. He makes those type of plays that teams are looking for now, those Patrick Mahomes off-script plays and, all that type of stuff. So I feel like that's the type of quarterback that teams covet, given the nature of the league. We know how it's a copycat league. So for me, I'm not surprised Cam Ward ended up being the number 1 overall. That's going to be the number 1 overall pick. But does him being the number 1 overall pick push Shedeur out of the first round? And guys like Jackson Dart was projected to go before him? I don't know, man. Like, if the reports are true and the Giants are falling in love with this cat and they're willing to give up extra draft capital to draft him, man, these dudes are going to be fired after this year, man. I'm sorry. How about that for a bold prediction? If the Giants draft Jackson Dart, Joe Schoen and doggone Brian Daboll are out the door. They're done.
Yeah. I don't know if I would call that particularly bold. I feel like that's a lock. But it goes down, Jarvis, because we heard the buzz during Week in Mobile where like you and I were talking and we were talking about, people are praising Jackson Dart and we're just like, I know we weren't focused on the quarterbacks. We were focused on the trenches. But when we did watch the quarterbacks, it was just like, I don't get it. But like that to me was the moment where I was just like, they're going to talk themselves into Jackson Dart by the time we get to the draft. And that seems like that's where we're at.
And you know what, man? That's goes back to what we talked about on a previous show. Like teams will look at tape all season. And then once they see guys go to these senior bowls and all of this stuff, and then they get, and then the comeback, like, oh, let me go back and watch some more film. No, you've already watched the film. The kind of stuff it's supposed to do is confirm what you already seen on tape. If you're going back to watch film, all you're doing is trying to justify the numbers or the measurables, or the interviews that you like when you had a chance to talk to them. And I don't think that's what the Giants was a first-round quarterback. Who said that? Who was saying who's pound the table for Jackson Dart to be first? With it, man. I think it's a lot of this pre-draft conversations, anonymous scouts, killing Shador and all that stuff, man. I think it's just weird to me, man. It's weird behavior, and I don't believe that he's a second round quarterback. I just don't believe that. Given the quarterbacks that have gone in the first round in the past 4 or 5 years, you telling me Shador Sanders isn't better than Bo Nix?
I knew we would get some Bo Nix slander on this episode, Jarvis. I appreciate you.
Yeah, I mean, I hate that, for him to catch that straight or, or whatever, or that blind face robbing, you know what I'm saying, pull the gun out and all that stuff. But I mean, I'm just saying, man, nobody was checking for Bo Nix like that. And then all of a sudden, Sean Payton falls in love with him, throws him in his system where he has to complete 2 or 3 yard passes all game. Most of the, unless you're playing against the Falcons and he running wide open in the field, he can make that throw, should be able to make that type of stuff. But I don't know. I'm just saying, I don't think he's that talented of a quarterback for a guy like Shador, who I feel has elite traits as far as accuracy. I feel like he has that confidence and swag, all that stuff, man. I feel like he has that. And I feel like he can come in and be a legitimate starter. Is he going to be a franchise changing? I don't know. I do feel like this dude is a first round worthy for sure.
Yeah. Well, we will see, Jarvis. I believe the Titans are now officially on the clock, so we will duck out of here so folks can go see Cam Ward be the number 1 pick, and we'll see what other of these bold predictions come true. Jarvis and myself will be reacting to whatever the Falcons wind up doing in round 1 a little bit later on Locked On Sports Atlanta, as well as Locked On Falcons. So make sure you continue to make both shows your first or second listen by subscribing or following for free on YouTube or wherever you listen to podcasts. And of course, the entire Locked On Podcast Network is going to have you covered with every single pick. Go check out Tyler Rowland, Locked On Titans, see his reaction to the Cam Ward selection, see all the reactions of all the Locked On hosts to all the picks tonight, guys. It is all part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every